Hey friends out there in YouTube land, Rob here. Today I want to talk to you about editing. I've even got my little red notebook out, so that means it's a coffee cup kind of conversation. Why don't you get some snacks and let's go over this. Today, what actually brings about today's thought or topic or video is I got like my 100th email about some exterior company wanting to edit my photos and cull my photos. I was working on the website, and I noticed that my photo hits and certain new images that I was posting were going up, like really, really high, like hundreds and hundreds. And I wondered what was going on with that. And then I got several emails from different editing companies offering to edit my photos for 50 cents each, or like a cull and edit for a package. And I got to thinking, what in the world is this mess? Like, realistically, I've created an image and a look through a particular process over the past 10 years, and why would I want to give that kind of control over to anybody else? And that got me thinking a lot about what it means to actually edit and my edit process altogether in the first place. And I'm in the middle of training a couple of new photographers right now, and I have this question a lot, like, how do you edit photos? And so that's the impetus for today's video. Now, keep in mind, as I talk about these things, I'm going to be doing it based on a wedding photographer workflow, which is not 100 images of the same thing, but 1,000 or more images from several photographers in a day. Could be as many as 3,000 images that need to be culled and need to be graded, need to be sorted, need to be put together, and then need to be delivered in a way that is consistent across multiple weddings as well as multiple years of business. And that means that the way that I shoot and photograph and edit may be different than a landscape photographer or a product photographer. But I think most of the things that we talk about as concepts will apply to whatever field it is that you are thinking about when it comes to photography. And with that being said, I hope that you find this video helpful, and if you do, don't forget to leave some comments down below. Hit the subscribe and the like button, and if you'd like to support what I do, use the Amazon links down there next time you're shopping. Okay, so I got some notes here, and I want to let you know that, first of all, editing is not about the software. We're not even going to talk about computers today other than just as tools. Editing is also not about the hardware, and both of those statements come with very big asterisks or caveats to say. When you start thinking about your editing process, I'm trying to say that the hardware and the software isn't really a part of it. It actually has to do more with the process of what it is you're going to be doing. For me, getting to this kind of a portrait right here, let me get out of the way, right? Or something like this right here, right? Starts a long time before those pictures are ever made, right? And it starts with something that I've got right here. Ooh, this is going to be mystical to some of you, right? This is a shot list, okay? And the shot list has information on the front and the back. This is a hard cardstock, and I use it because in order to provide that consistency that I wanted to have throughout weddings over time, and in order to protect myself legally, I needed to be able to provide documentation that would help keep me on track, but also show that I did my due diligence should that question ever arise in a legal issue. And it has not, but if it did, I've got shot lists from all of my weddings, hard copies. Generally, the bride will sign them at the end of the wedding as well. So we've got all the information right there. But more importantly, what's actually happening there is that's building a standard operating procedure for how I'm going to deliver wedding images, and that means that I've also thought about this, which means that when you think about your business, whatever it might be with photography, how you want to deliver those images is something that you'll begin planning, and you'll begin creating your own workflow with that as well. Now, the process is actually much more detailed than that, but editing begins with creating that contract, with deciding what terms you want to have in it. The shot list is a part of my contract. Each client has a very similar shot list, 100 of my signature shots that we go through. Different kinds of clients have different kinds of shot lists. Not all clients have the same kind of shot list, but as you can imagine, those are different tools in the toolbox based on what you're going to do that day. specifically for weddings. There's a photography shot list and a videography shot list. Also, whenever one of my videographers goes out there, they take this, but it's the videography side, and it's got a checklist for all the gear that they're expected to have already ready to go, as well as the shots, instructions on the back about things to think about when they're not thinking about what to think about, such as detail, imagery, such as expositional stuff like the location, all those types of things. And these act as tools to help keep us on the same page. And once again, all of those decisions have been made ahead of time in order to help me produce a book of work for my clients that can be consistent throughout a decade. Now, although the shots might be consistent throughout a decade, I continue to grow them, the overall look may change throughout the decade. And that's a very important thing. As photographers, we're not just one-man bands when it comes to the looks of the images that we're producing, but rather we're albums of seasons, right, that change over and over and over, but change subtly, like leaves changing on a tree. It's a very philosophical thing. When I think about my business, and I think about how I discuss my business with my brides, I discuss myself and my photographers as historians documenting someone's beginning, the beginning of a family, with that eye, the eye of an historian. And we curate those images into memories. They're not just candid snapshots. All of the images are editorialized, and if that just means to tell a story. Well, that is the difference between a snapshot or candid image and an editorialized image, something that you have thought about, meaning that there's context to the image. There's things that explain what is happening in the image just from the details that are included in them, other than just the picture that's told. You can tell more of the story, and that's a real thing. Getting the eye to build the composition that editorializes an image is something that leads to a great image. But all images, speaking photography now, need to have a couple of things in common. You've got to fill your frame with the subject to tell that story. You have to make sure that the focus is correct to tell the story. And you have to make sure that there's nothing distracting in the picture that will derail the story. When you have those three things in your image, whatever that is, however you've composed it, the image has the potential to be a great one. If you miss any of those three things, it will just be a good one or a candid or something. You need to have all three. When we look at that a little bit further, it's not really just about that look from the composition or even the different looks that are developed over time. It has to do with the consistency of a look that can be developed and then delivered over and over again. In my 10 years of photographing weddings professionally, actually it's a little over 10 years, we're closing in on 12, but in the past decade of photographing, it has taken me years to develop commiserate looks for different styles of weddings, specifically tailored to different styles of brides. And it didn't start off that way. I'll share with you now my original look that was developed over time was what I consider my boutique signature look. The boutique signature look is my standard editing, as I would for a digital platform, that does not attempt to have any kind of print-like quality. Since we're living in a digital world, so many of the filters that you see online from Instagram, I know it's not fair to call what we're doing Instagram, but you get the point. The idea of applying a filter doesn't really do anything more than attempt to generate some kind of analog look. And so my boutique edits are specifically designed to be able to be printed and provide that type of analog look from a real printed medium because they're going to be printed on real paper. They're also going to look great online. But a couple of the things that are very important. I look for the yellow tones in light. I like a high contrast and high saturation curve, and I like a very vibrant image. The reason that this has been developed for my signature boutique images is quite simple. Cell phones and TVs and computer screens is where most people are going to view the images, which means that I want them to look their best, being very bright, contrasty, things like that. It's another reason that people enjoy Samsung displays. They're just not as natural or neutral as an iPhone display, but people seem to really like them. Think about that as televisions. Also, it's very easy to dial back the saturation for printing should it need to be, but also saturation can be lost a lot in the different type of print mediums, specifically on matte mediums, which is where having extra saturation is very helpful for printing so that it looks really nice. Another one that I've developed over time is actually my classic matte. Now this one has been done over the past 5 or 6 years, basically in order to deliver a digital image that has the feeling of a print matte image. So we see a little bit more fade in the blacks, lower contrast curves, that more matte look, slightly lower saturation, but still relatively vibrant compared to a regular traditional film print. If you were going to think about that, I think Velvia is kind of like the idea for the boutique, except toned down for digital. I think that my classic would be chrome, but with a little bit of extra the vibrant side of chrome. And then if I was going to consider my another way to deliver it would be in a more neutral side, kind of like Pro 400H by Fujifilm, which is a high contrast but lower saturation, really shows the greens. Those are 3 different categories of images that can come from 2 different looks that I've developed. My final look that I have is actually an inkwell edit. Inkwells are what I call my specialized black and whites. I actually paint the color away digitally. They're designed to be printed on aluminum or vellum, which is backlit in a light box. It is gorgeous. They're very low contrast, but have completely blown out highlights in the top registers of the highlights and inky blacks. They kind of represent my interpretation of Acros, which is really nice, specifically when lit from behind with a warm light. They're gorgeous, and I like them. But those looks took years to develop, and to be able to consistently deliver them requires attention to detail and practice. That practice is done by photographers out on the street that I'm training, right? When we talk about the process of photography, and it's put further into play when we talk about editing on the big screen back there. Now, once you've got your look down pat, which takes a while, but you have a look that you feel you can deliver consistently, that's when it's time for you to begin branching out with that look and actually improving on it. This area of constant improvement, but small improvements over time in order to maintain that consistency. Or at least that's how I've done it. When we do that, I actually have a process now which is different digitally than what I had in the past. I used to work specifically in Aperture or Photoshop, but now I work almost entirely in Lightroom. I worked in Lightroom for quite some time, developing my techniques in Lightroom for editing, and it has only been in the past year or so since Luminar 4. I've been testing Skylium and all that other stuff, but for years, but it's only been since like Luminar 4 that I've begun trusting some of the automatic enhanced features that Luminar has, which helps me do some of the basic things quicker. What those things are things like face whitening, teeth brightening, getting rid of dark circles under the eye, and even to some extent some skin correction. Has a nice automatic skin correction specifically in the most recent version. There are some other interesting tasks that I've been using more and more lately, which is my blue sky replacement. Normally I would go into Photoshop and do the blue sky replacement, but Luminar, straight from Lightroom as a plugin, will replace the sky very nicely. Now around here I have my own skies that I've gone and photographed, and I have them specifically categories to the locations that I photograph mostly, so that I can put a normal sky in from a local area with from different times of day when I need to have those things. But those are just a couple of the processes that I've used that have become automatic or more automated that I would used to spend quite a lot of time in Photoshop having to do. After I'm done with my image in Luminar, I bring it back into Lightroom for the final delivery. Once I get it into Lightroom for that final delivery, I'm working in PSD files. I export to Luminar in a PSD file. I bring it back into Lightroom in a PSD file from my raw file input, and then I'm able to deliver it. And I maintain both of those libraries in the same folder so I can go back and update my edits as necessary. The final step to all of this is really rinse and repeat. You have to continue to practice your craft. And if you're not photographing something and creating different looks, even from the same images that you have, you won't be growing. If you're not growing, your look definitely isn't changing. It'll become stagnant. Much like McDonald's with the McRib, there's some things you want to bring back all the time, and there's some things you just want to bring back once in a while. Okay? in this instance, you don't want to bring back your faddish photography all the time. You'd prefer to have the staples on there that are consistent. However, as you try, as you do your rinse and repeat, and you begin to understand how your images are interacting with the editing workflow that you've developed, you'll begin to notice how they're changing. And you'll begin to notice what looks good and what doesn't. Your composition will change, your workflow will change, your look will change. And over time, you will be able to create that look, which becomes known as your signature brand. For me, at least, that's how it worked. Guys, I hope you found this video helpful. Notice it wasn't a lot about what happens in there. It was more about what happens in here. And that's the most important thing to remember. Photography is all about creativity. There is no wrong way to do it. And if you found any of this helpful, please let me know down below. I want to thank you for watching and remind you that I will catch you on the flip side. Bye for now.